Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Ladies Podcast, the podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we got a couple of things to get into. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic podcasts here on the YouTube platform. So make sure you get that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. Let's go to get right into it. Ladies and gentlemen, we finally got to see this team whole. We finally got to see this team whole. A lineup in which all of Desmond Bane, Jalen Suggs, Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and Wendell Carter Jr. all shared the floor. Mind you, Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and Desmond Bane have only shared the floor for less than 80 minutes this entire season. Goga Batazde, big-time double-double off the bench with 21 minutes. He was able to get 14 points, 15 rebounds, and 6 assists. Never been done off the bench in NBA history. Goga Batazde did it. Tristan da Silva, 12 points in 19 minutes. Javon Carter, a perfect 4 for 4 from the field. Perfect 3 of 3 from beyond the arc in 15 minutes off the bench. Anthony Black played limited minutes here, 16, but did do well with 7 points and 5 rebounds. Even my boy Jamal Cain had 8 points off the bench. We finally got to see the Magic put it all together. We finally got to see this team with all of their guys healthy. What could they look like? What could they be? Could they reestablish the remnants of the team that they had that kicked off the year? And the answer was yes. Now, yes, they were playing against a Minnesota Timberwolves team that didn't have Julius Randle, didn't have Rudy Gobert, didn't have Ayo Dosunmu, didn't have Anthony Edwards. Understandable. But I think it's less of the principle of who they played and more so how they played. Here's a few things that stand out. The Orlando Magic out-rebounded the Minnesota Timberwolves 56-41. 19-9 on the offensive glass. 33 assists, and this is a trend that's been very, very well documented over the last week, is during this stretch, the Orlando Magic have been doing a much better job of sharing the basketball. 33 assists in this game. Won the points in the paint battle 64-50. Won the second chance points battle, 28-14, and scored 26 points off of 16 forced turnovers. That's simply the Orlando Magic playing hard-nosed, high-effort, punch-you-in-the-face basketball. We finally saw the team fully together, and it crescendoed into, we've seen this winning streak progress, but this fourth game crescendoed the formula of like, okay, but what could this team look like if everything is put together and everybody is healthy? If everything is put together and everything is healthy and Jamal Mosley has his full rotation and these guys are all back together in the full 8 to 10 man rotation that they were leaning on at the beginning of the year, except swapping out Tyus Jones for Javon Carter and switching out Jet Howard for getting Jamal Cain some more minutes. What could they look like? And they've played really, really well. They played really, really well in that game, and they played really, really well specifically over this last 4. More importantly, I want to say that I'm glad that the Magic won their last regular season game at the Kia Center. And that might sound like something that's not very important. It might sound like something that's not really like headline worthy per se, right? But in my personal opinion, I genuinely believe that this team owed it to fans after what happened against Atlanta. This team owed it to Orlando Magic fans. And don't get me wrong, they had just played at home against the Pistons beforehand. But this was a season in which that winning this game was a message to fans that we have not given up on the season. Winning these last handful of games in response to that Atlanta Hawks game, I think, has been not only a wake-up call for this team, but more particularly, I think that this has been a time where they've really had to look themselves in the mirror and ask themselves who they want to be and what they want this season to be remembered for. Because there's a lot of different things we could point to. The Jamal Mosley questions, the injuries concerns across the board. Is Paulo Banchero a true superstar or not? There's a million different questions this season could be encapsulated in. Was Desmond Bain the right pick of a player that they should have invested 4 first-round picks in as far as the trade market? There's a lot of different things that can encapsulate this season. But how they end the year off, it will be the deciding factor of how we remember this year. If they end the last 6 games off, 6-0, finish as a 6 seed, and they're in the playoffs and they're playing, spoiler alert, to the New York Knicks in round 1 or the Cleveland Cavaliers in round 1, we will see this season a lot differently. A season from hell, but we'll see it a lot differently based off of how they close out the year. And I think more importantly, them closing things out with this win over Minnesota at home sends that message to fans that they want to put their best foot forward, something that we've had questions about whether or not that's true at multiple points throughout the season. And now, coming off of that game, we can start discussing something that might have seemed impossible just about a week ago and now somehow still feels very real, which is the idea of the Orlando Magic clinching a top 6 seed in the Eastern Conference and avoiding the play-in tournament entirely. I found an article from the Orlando Magic Sports Illustrated site. Shout out to them. We're going to read through this because honestly, this is a little convoluted, but still very real and possible. So the Orlando Magic are riding a 4-game win streak after beating the Minnesota Timberwolves 132-120 inside the Kia Center. With the win, the Magic have improved to 44-36 on the season, putting them in the number 7 spot in the Eastern Conference standings with 2 games to go. The Magic are still in contention to get a top 6 spot. That would save them from having to participate in the play-in tournament for a second year in a row. However, they still need some help from their Eastern Conference rivals to make it happen. Starting with the Toronto Raptors, the Raptors need to lose 2 of their final games in order for the Magic to have a chance to jump them in the standings. The Magic would need to go 2-0 in their final 2 games, while the Raptors would need to go 1-2 or 0-3. And as I mentioned beforehand, they play the Miami Heat, who are also deadlocked in, who find themselves deadlocked in the play-in tournament, the New York Knicks, and then the Brooklyn Nets. The likelihood is that they're more likely to be 1-3. They are more likely to be 1-3 than they are to be 0-3, and that's simply built off of the fact that I think that Brooklyn Nets game at the end of the year, I don't think they're going to lose that. Could they lose to Miami and lose to New York? I think so. We will be carefully watching because they actually play that game against New York. They play that game, against Miami tonight. So this game right here will pretty much be the determining factor in my personal opinion. If they win this game, even if they lose to New York, they will likely beat and probably even blow out Brooklyn in the last game of the year. So this game against Miami is the big one. This is the determining factor right here. Tonight's game against Miami could be the turning point. Next up is the Sixers. The Sixers have 3 games left, and if they go 3-0, the lowest they can finish is number 7. However, the Sixers have lost their last 2 games and face a difficult back-to-back with 2 tip-offs in less than 24 hours against the red-hot Houston Rockets, who've won their last 7 games, and the Indiana Pacers, who still have the chance to play spoiler. If the Magic drop either of those games or their season finale at home against the Milwaukee Bucks, the Magic can jump them in the standings. So essentially, we need the Sixers to lose at least one. We need them to lose at least one of these games against Houston, Indiana, and Milwaukee. Again, hilariously enough, our playoff fate will be relying on them in the game against Houston tonight. These are games that I'm essentially telling you. I'm essentially telling you guys as Magic fans, these are non-Orlando Magic games that you may want to be tuned into and paying attention to today. Miami versus Toronto and Philly versus Houston are two of the most important games for the Orlando Magic to watch that are not Orlando Magic games tonight. Last but not least are the Charlotte Hornets. The Magic have now a full game ahead of the Hornets for the number 7 seed. The Hornets find themselves in ninth place, but have 2 games left that are winnable against teams that won't be putting their best foot forward. They play the Detroit Pistons, who have already wrapped up the number 1 seed, and then they play the New York Knicks. There's a good chance the Hornets could win out, but they would need the Magic to lose at least one game to overtake them. So in this case, the Hornets could win against Detroit and New York, but if Orlando closes out the season 6-0 with wins over Chicago and Boston, even if Charlotte beats Detroit and beats New York, Charlotte would not be able to overtake the Orlando Magic. It says, our take, the Magic should win the final 2 games against the Chicago Bulls and Boston Celtics, both of whom aren't playing for much to end the season. That should give them 46 wins, which is 5 more than the year before. The matchup against the Bulls and Celtics aren't total slam dunks. While the Bulls and Celtics aren't playing for much to close out the regular season, Orlando has struggled against Boston, specifically when it comes to defending the three-point line. The Magic need some help to get to the top 6, but regardless of where they end up, they are going into the postseason with some momentum, which could prepare them for whatever challenge comes ahead. All of that essentially states that the Orlando Magic are in a really interesting spot where, like I mentioned last episode, they control their own destiny from the perspective of, if you win out, you close these final 2 games, and you finish the season 6-0, there's a lot that you need to go right. But for example, the Charlotte Hornets, if you go 6-0 to close out the season, it doesn't matter what the Charlotte Hornets do. If you close out the season 6-0, if Toronto loses this game, and Philly loses this game against Houston, you could find yourself as the 6th seed tonight, April 9th. We talk about inflection points a ton on this podcast. I'm going to use the phrasing point again. April 9th could be another inflection point for this team, coming off of a win over the Minnesota Timberwolves at home to close out their home regular season schedule on April 8th. April 9th could be another inflection point where, if the Toronto Raptors lose to the Miami Heat and the Philadelphia 76ers lose to the Houston Rockets, the Orlando Magic could then build off of that momentum, paired with their own 4-game winning streak momentum, to win the last 2 games of the regular season and position themselves to finish as a top 6 seed and completely out of the play-in tournament. So in other words, 2 things need to happen. Technically 3, but 2 things need to happen. Toronto needs to lose to Miami. Philly needs to lose to Houston. And Orlando has to finish the job. And that last part is almost as important as the other 2, because even if Toronto loses, even if Philly loses, if the Magic do not close these last 2 games, it still puts the opportunity up in the air in a situation where they could just simply steal the situation. They could steal the 6th seed for themselves rather than leaving it up to interpretation. Losing either of these last 2 games leaves it up to a bunch of convoluted tiebreakers. But winning these last 2 games, paired with Toronto and Philly losing, now guarantees, or let's say now nearly guarantees, that they will be completely out of the play-in tournament and put themselves in a position now to rest for a few extra days, maybe get a more favorable first round matchup, right? April 9th will be yet another inflection point for the Orlando Magic. And it's funny because it's going to be a game, it's going to be a day where they're not even playing any games. We as Magic fans are carefully, aggressively, but carefully watching two, really three other Eastern Conference foes dictate our playoff future. Never thought I would say this to Orlando Magic fans, but you're a Miami Heat fan tonight. You're a Miami Heat fan tonight. You are banking on the Miami Heat to help as far as sealing the Orlando Magic's playoff future. We want the Magic to win. I mean, we want the Heat to win, and we want the Rockets to win. You tonight. It might not sound great, but you tonight are a Miami Heat fan. Last but not least, let's go ahead and get to you guys' comments from last episode. Shout out to you guys for always dropping comments. Let's start from the bottom and work our way up. Actually, let's start from the top. We've been working from the bottom the last couple episodes. Lando Rock says, you have done a great job covering this team all year, and Magic fans look forward to your analysis every day. Thank you, boss. I really appreciate that. Definitely has been a great experience learning this team more, learning the fan base more, and things like that. I've really enjoyed like covering this team, and it's been a really different perspective, like zeroing in on one team every single day and learning more about them. Bertha the Magician says, Jamal Cain seems like he can be a Andrew Wiggins, Tobias Harris type role player. I would like Jace to learn the TJ McConnell way of scoring and facilitating. That would be pretty interesting. I think Jamal Cain does fit the you say Andrew Wiggins, Tobias Harris, you mean like this kind of combo wing forward that like, very operates very good in the mid-range area, does have some athleticism to him. If Jamal Cain finds himself anywhere in between the spectrum of Andrew Wiggins and Tobias Harris, Orlando found themselves a diamond in the rough. And I already believe so, but I think that if you find Andrew Wiggins was arguably on that Warriors championship run that he was a part of. He was arguably like the best two-way wing in basketball that year. If we're talking about playing both sides of the floor, Andrew Wiggins was arguably the best two-way wing in basketball that year. Tobias Harris has been a model of consistency, averaging, anywhere between 14 to 16 points a game for the better part of the last 3 to 4 years plus now. If you can get Jamal Cain to be anywhere in between the spectrum of Harris and Wiggins, I mean, the sky truly is the limit for this team. As far as Jace Richardson and TJ McConnell, I want Jace to be more aggressive as a three-point shooter, and that's not TJ McConnell's game. So I would disagree with you there. But me personally, I would want Jace to be somebody who embraces. Oh man, I'm trying to think of like a player that fits more of the mold of Jace. I'll table that because I don't have an exact name at the moment, but I want a guy who is more focused on trying to space the floor and be a legitimate, I want him to be somebody who, yes, I know you can shot create on ball, but for this Magic team, especially as currently constructed, like that's not what this team needs. This team needs a reliable floor spacer that comes off of screens, comes off of pin downs, is constantly moving. Like I'm not trying to plug him into like a Klay Thompson role, but like I kind of am in a weird way. And I mean specifically on offense, obviously. He's too undersized to be what Klay Thompson was defensively. But I think offensively, like a guy that is just constantly active as a movement shooter. I think that's like the kind of I think of. Oh man, I don't really want to disrespect anybody, but I also I think Grayson Allen, I think is an interesting comp here for the play style that I want him to have. Man, I can't think of anybody else right now offhand, but again, I would prioritize Jace's development around being somebody who can move off ball, navigate through screens, and constantly find himself as a dangerous catch and shoot shooter. That's the version of Jace that I think is going to be best. That is the version of Jace that I think that is going. That's the version of Jace that I think is the most helpful to this version of the Orlando Magic, in my personal opinion. Birth of the Magician also said got into a debate about why Tibbs would not be a good fit since he's a more polished Jamal Mosley, which I agree with, by the way. I agree with that. I think I said that, by the way, when somebody mentioned Tom Thibodeau. There's a reason why the Knicks fired him. I would love Sam Cassell or just promote Prunty. Look how Mitch Johnson looks. I think it's worth a shot. Even with Wimby out, Spurs played well. Heck, hire Bob Myers and Mark Jackson. I may be delusional. A smidget. A smidget. The Bob Myers thing I like. I like the idea of that. He's getting a lot of buzz around the Chicago Bulls right now. Prunty could be a good hire to just go ahead and like just elevate him. He already has a relationship within the organization and with the players. Somebody who is a little bit more offensive minded could be an interesting, X's and O's guy moving forward. And I think as an assistant coming off the bench, he's gonna lead with expertise. So when you talk about somebody that like Orlando Magic fans want to hear him talk more of the game instead of just the we need to play harder, we need to be more aggressive, we need to, this, that, and the third, that sounds more like rah-rah speech. Like as a guy coming off the bench as an assistant, I think that Prunty could be somebody who maybe gives Orlando Magic fans that nuanced side of the coaching conversations, right? So Prunty could be interesting. Not super crazy about Mark Jackson personally. I feel like Mark Jackson would end up falling into a very similar role as Jamal Mosley, especially with given how separated from the game he has been as far as being in NBA locker rooms. So I feel as though Mark Jackson would be in a similar situation as Jamal Mosley of kind of leaning with this rah rah. We play defense. We are focused on player development. We play hard. We like those are that's great, but that's that's shooting the messenger, bringing a new messenger. That's shooting the messenger, bringing a new messenger, but finding out he has the same message, essentially. I would love Tom Thibodeau over Mark Jackson, at least because I know that Tom has been in these locker rooms as of late. He has been somebody that's still developed and grown over the last couple of years. And we saw last year in particular that he did become a little bit better as far as his lineup constructions and how he managed minutes and things of that nature. He got at least a little bit better with it last season. Sam Cassell, man. That guy, man. He feels like the answer to me. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Carlos Cards though believes that Penny coming back would be the move. There was mutual interest before. Lock it in, and come lead these boys to a chip. It's a perfect fit. Think about it. I don't know, man. I still am not like super crazy about the idea of like Penny Hardaway coming back as like head coach. I'm really not even like super crazy about the idea of like I'm really not even super crazy about like the idea of like a former Orlando Magic player like coming back and coaching this team, to be honest with you. Um I'm just not. I'm just not interested in it. I don't know. I don't know. I can't pinpoint it right now, but I'm just not interested in the idea of like name this former Orlando Magic player they should coach the Magic. Like I want somebody who's gonna come in and be an X's and O's guy. We've had enough of the coach speak and the we play hard and you know the real basic surface level stuff that I feel like former players as coaches are going to present unless you're like JJ Redick, who then kind of built a career from an analytical standpoint by being in the media and having his own podcast, talking with these players and developing relationship with these players. Unless you're JJ Redick, a lot of these former players are very distant from the game outside of podcasting. They're very distant from the NBA game specifically, not necessarily basketball, but from the NBA game. Very distant from it. I wouldn't want Shaq coaching this team. I don't want love 3D, but I wouldn't want Dennis Scott coaching this team. I wouldn't want Hito Turkoglu to come out of nowhere and decide he wants to coach the Orlando Magic. Like I'm kind of Kind of off that. Echo to the Voice says, if the Magic play now like we expected the beginning of the year and make a playoff run, Magic culture will be the new Heat culture. Coach Bud would be a strong candidate as well. Coach Bud would be a pretty dope option. His name has been brought up the least, and I think it's because nobody's necessarily sure of what this timeline of him stepping away from coaching looks like, because he did kind of make it sound very family oriented after he was fired, that he was going to kind of take some time away from coaching before he kind of stepped back into the fray of things, especially as a head coach. So I do think that he could be a pretty interesting he could be a really interesting name. um I let's table that, especially given the fact that Mike Malone is off the table now and Taylor Jenkins is likely to go to the Milwaukee Bucks. It sounds like all the momentum is leaning that way. Let's table Coach Bud as an option as well, because I actually do really like that one. iBless says your analysis on the situation can go either way for Orlando or any other team. It's not always good to watch your neighbor's business if you're not strong. It could make you want to follow everything they do. Anything can happen regardless. What they need to do is take care of the moment and stop worrying about years from now. The context about teams making it to the finals then digress the following season isn't a good example, because every team faces different situations and makes different decisions that lead to their own results. Just build a good structure and let it play out. It sounds like stress work the way you putting it, always trying to trade along with all the what ifs, this, what if that, hypothetical with no clear path. If it was up to you, probably a player would be traded every day based on feelings from game to game. I guess that's how most fans are when they get what they ask for and then they don't like it. I think you're like completely overthinking a lot of what's going on as far as the podcast and the conversation we had last time. So let's kind of address that bar for bar. As far as it's not good to watch your neighbor's business. So you're talking about my scenario where I was relating this team to the Atlanta Hawks of 2021 or the Heat of 2020 when they made the run to the NBA Finals or the Eastern Conference Finals, and then they thought that they could keep the roster as is, and then it ended up tail spinning for them, where they've been mediocre franchises since then in one way or another, have not had nearly the same level of success since that time. I'm sure you've heard this before if you've been watching basketball long enough, specifically NBA basketball, but a lot of times after the NBA Finals, a lot of people use this phrase. The phrase is, it's a copycat league. You hear it in NBA and you hear it in the NFL a lot as well, of the idea that once you see a formula that is worked in for a certain team, there are natural inklings to want to try to adapt that formula to your own roster with your own talent. For example, that same Atlanta Hawks team worked for years to essentially duplicate the roster construction that the Golden State Warriors had around Steph Curry by trying to build a very similar roster around Trae Young. There's a lot of different situations where you do need to be able to identify what is happening around you from a roster construction standpoint, because it can also be a strong indication of where the league is heading as far as the players who are going to be the best in the league moving forward, the teams who are going to be constantly in contention moving forward. It also is a great indication because you have to look at some of the teams that are going to get themselves back in the mix, right? What happens if the Boston Celtics next season are able to get a full season of Jason Tatum? They're in conversation to land Giannis Antetokounmpo. What happens if the Cleveland Cavaliers have to make major wholesale changes next year? The Indiana Pacers, we just got news that Tyrese Halliburton played his first 5-on-5 drill the other day. They're going to be coming back with him, Aaron Nesmith, Pascal Siakam, Andrew Nembhard, Ivica Zubac, and a potential top 4 pick in this upcoming NBA draft. You do have to watch what your neighbor does, because at the end of the day, if you are to, as a general manager, if you're only focused on the present, you're only doing half, maybe only a third of what your job requires. You have to be focused on player development. You have to be focused on team building beyond this year. You have to be focused on how big do you truly believe your window of contention truly is. You do. Um, you do need to have good structure and let things play out this season. I think it's very important to look at things from that perspective. I also think that it has to be understood that I have to do 4 topics a day on this podcast. And by me having to do 4 topics, there's a lot of different scenarios, hypotheticals, and so on and so forth that need to be discussed. The idea of a player being traded every single time that they play a game based off of how I feel is not only silly, but nowhere close to consistent with where I've been standing on this entire season. And as somebody who's definitely been in the comment sections very consistently throughout this year, I think that you know that. I've never really been a strong proponent of trading more than 3 people on this roster. I've always believed that Jonathan Isaac was somebody that needed to be moved, and you guys have come along on the ride with me for that belief, that this is a guy that whether he was going to need to be traded or waived, that he's somebody that his finances paired with his lack of production on the floor don't match to the point that he can't be a key cog in this system anymore. I've mentioned that Jet Howard needs to be traded or should be considered as a trade candidate because he simply is being phased out of this version of the Orlando Magic. Not just from drafting Jace Richardson, but I think what Javon Carter has brought to the table. I think what we've gotten from Jamal Cain as of the last month has been huge. And it's quite frankly led to phasing out Jet Howard's minutes. And so what is the point of keeping him on the rotation and potentially this summer or next summer having to pay him, knowing that there's no real perfect spot for him to get real minutes right now, given that we've seen Jamal Cain, for example, shooting 40% from beyond the arc this season. Or we've seen the point of attack defense that Javon Carter brings to the table, paired with the fact that he's not scared to shoot the 3 at high volume. I think he's averaging around 3 to 4 3-point attempts per game, maybe closer to 5 over the course of the last month. So yeah, I think the main thing I'm trying to say here is that for a podcast that has to cover 4 topics a day, 5 days a week, for an Orlando Magic team that does not have the financial flexibility to just make 1,000,001 different moves and is not going to be the most active in free agency this upcoming summer because they don't have the money to do so, meaning the only way we would see any version of change on this team involves trades. All of these hypothetical scenarios and things are not only topics that are meant to help me from a thought exercise standpoint and to give me more things to be able to discuss on the podcast as part of the structure that Fan Arch has developed, but also on top of that, it gives a real thought exercise for Orlando Magic fans to discuss hypothetical trades, potential postseason pathways, and things of that nature from a team building perspective moving forward as well. So yeah, shout out to you, I bless. No disrespect. No, it's not one of those things where like anybody's like in their feelings or anything. It's definitely one of those things where I think, especially as an avid watcher / listener, I think this is one of those things where maybe you're misinterpreting my viewpoint on things. But again, having covered this team for the entirety of what will be the full 82-game regular season, my stance on things like trades this year have been very clear. I don't want to trade Paulo. I don't want to trade Franz. I've been an advocate of not wanting to trade Wendell Carter Jr. because I've been the person yelling from the rooftops, who do you think you can trade for at the center position that's better than Wendell Carter Jr.? I don't think you can trade Desmond Bane, and even if you could, I wouldn't because he's been our most consistent player all year. I don't want to lose Anthony Black. I've been a huge proponent of seeing more minutes from Noah Pinda, and I recently have come along to the idea of really wanting to see Jamal Cain on this team next year. And I really want to see Javon Carter on this team next year. Goga Batazde is somebody that's been brought up in trade talks, but he has one more year left under contract, and he's going to be a guy that if Jakob Poeltl got 20 million, he's going to be looking for anywhere between 15 to 17 million on the open market where he becomes a free agent. And I don't know if the Orlando Magic are going to be able to afford to bring him back on that number. And I don't think Goga Batazde thinks that he can. I think Goga Batazde thinks he can get that kind of money and maybe even a starting spot if he goes somewhere else, like a Los Angeles, for example. So like the idea of like wanting a player to be traded based off my feelings on a game to game basis and things like that is just not really accurate. And I'm sure that a lot of other people who have consistently been tapped in with the podcast know that a lot of the trade conversations we have are not my own trades being drawn up. They're trades that are written up by the media that I share with you guys and we use as a thought experiment. If anything, the comment section has been pushing the idea of maybe a Paulo Banchero for Giannis under the Antetokounmpo trade swap and things of that nature. So I guess that's kind of my like overall thoughts on that. Luis Rosario says, not only are we clutch team, we have three players that have already proven themselves in P5, Franz, and Bane with walk-off shots that will keep the competition guessing on who is going to take the last shot with all three of them on the floor. I will put Suggs fourth on that list, so bring on the competition. Let's go, Magic. Yeah, I think that's the scary part. In a 7-game series, last 2 minutes of the game within 3 points, Magic are scarily and eerily confident. Excuse me, and they should be because of the way that the season is played. And last but not least, and I actually purposely saved this question for last because I thought it was a really dope question. Shout out to Berto the Magician for this one. I thought this was a really dope question. He says, J-Dog, who are some G League guys on the Osceola, I'm sure you guys told me this, Osceola Magic, that you think can fit our lineup? I'm more into developing players and gems rather than buying or trading for established ones. Okay, so cool. Boom. Shout out to you for this question because I thought this was really dope and it really had to make my wheels turn because I've been tapped in with the Magic G League team a lot more over the last like 2 to 3 weeks as, obviously their regular season and, their regular season, winded off and things like that. And I thought of a few names that come to mind. So Colin Castleton as a rebounding big, I think is one that I think would fit really well, especially if there is the idea of losing Jonathan Isaac due to having to waive him or potentially having to trade a Goga Batazde in order to get that potential looming contract extension off the books, right? Colin Castleton would come in and essentially just be a big-time rebounder. I believe he averaged double-digit rebounds in the G this year. I'll double-check to make sure. Yes, he led the team with 11 rebounds per game, along with 1.2 blocks per game and 17.6 points per game. We're not expecting him to come out and score. We're expecting him to come out and rebound and especially hit the offensive glass. I think Colin Castleton would be a really good fit. Another person that I've been infatuated with at the guard position for quite some time, dating back to even before he played for the Magic G League team, is Lester Quinones. He's somebody that, he was a pickup by the Golden State Warriors who played, ironically, under Penny Hardaway at Memphis and has always been a bit of a gunslinger type. If you look at his play style, I'm going to go more so based off of his play style at Memphis than how he played at Golden State. He's a guy that has a lot of Jordan Poole in him. And I think it's ironic that Golden State was the team that took him because that's, of course, the archetype that Jordan Poole archetype is one that we did see thrive really well on a multitude of different playoff and eventually even a championship winning team, right? So I think that Lester Quinones, again, a guy that really needs to develop. I think his biggest question mark is his decision making with the basketball. I think he has all the wiggle, he has all the handle. I think he has a really decent shot that he can lean on as well. Somebody that I think you can really rely on to be a shot maker. He averaged 23 points in the G this past year and played 36 games in the G League. I think he's a guy that could really be an interesting shot maker off the bench. And again, we've mentioned this beforehand of the idea of needing this microwave score, this Malik Monk, Cam Thomas type of score off the bench. Lester Quinones kind of is a lot of that. Again, I think he leans a lot closer to maybe Cam Thomas as a decision maker on ball than Malik Monk. I think Malik Monk, if that's the upside of Lester Quinones, that would be a much more refined version of Lester, and I think that would be a really, really good NBA player if he could just make better decisions with the basketball, specifically as a facilitator. But as a scorer, he has, I think, a lot of the upside of like your typical bucket getting two guard. And then number three is somebody that I think would really be kind of an interesting fit, more so for what he brings as a floor spacer, and that's Javonte Smart. So I remember Javonte Smart from LSU. And at LSU, I remember he played 3 years at LSU, if I'm not mistaken. Or he may have played a year at Houston. Um, I don't know if I'm mixing him up with somebody else, but I know he played. I know his final year at LSU, he finished off his career in college as a junior, shooting 40% from beyond the arc. Javonte is also one of those guys that is like a very hard nosed point of attack defender, gonna hound you, gonna be trying to play up on the basketball, gonna be swiping, gonna be doing a lot of the hand checky stuff to try to get in guards' grills. Like, this is a guy who, like, he can score. He can score. Don't get me wrong. And the G averaged 15.9 points per game in 27 minutes. He's a guy who I think can put the ball in the basket. But I think his calling card is the fact that he can be a really reliable three-point shooter, and he can be a really scary, like, point of attack defender. Like him, he's very much in the Javon Carter mold, right? Like, if we couldn't bring Javon Carter back, Javonte Smart, I just realized what just happened there. Javonte Smart could be a really interesting player who has a lot of the similar comps to Javon Carter without it's weird to say without saying it's weird to say without being nearly as expensive, because I don't think it'll be expensive to bring Javon Carter back. But I think that outside of the, like, quote unquote veteran leadership intangibles that Javon brings to the table, I think Javonte brings a lot of very similar things from a play style perspective. So again, that would be Colin Castleton for his rebounding, Lester Quinones for his shot creation, and Javonte Smart for, like, the 3-and-D point guard, shooting guard archetype that he brings to the table that tends to fit really well on these Orlando Magic teams, next to Paolo, next to Franz. So those would be the three guys that, if we're talking about plucking guys from the G, that I would be the most interested in the Orlando Magic, calling up or putting a lot of effort into developing moving forward. So shout out to you for that question. I actually, when I saw that in the comment section, I wanted to make sure I did some real research. I kind of, again, have been tapped in with the Magic's G League team over the last couple of weeks, but thinking about it from the perspective of how they translate to the main roster was a really different thought exercise. So shout out to you for that. With all that being said, this has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.